guess took. So why don't we just start with some introductions, and then we will, like I said, go through the agenda and then the minutes. So my name is Denise Corsi, ATEL Program Coordinator and the committee chair. Betsy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Betsy, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry. I'm Betsy Beach, and I work at Amos House in the job training program. I'm hard of hearing, and I'm a commissioner on the commission for the deaf and hard of hearing.
Thank you. Ernest?
Yes. Hi, I am Ernest Covington III, and I'm the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing.
Jan?
I'm Jan Luby. I worked in services for the deaf for many years at Goodwill, retired, and now I'm working at Perspective.
Thank
Part-time.
you, Jan. Paul?
Oh, you're also on mute.
Sorry. This is like my fourth Zoom meeting today. You think I'd get a hang of it? Paul Hewitt from the Office of Rehabilitation Services.
Thank you, Paul. Cheryl?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cheryl Burrell. I'm the Chief of Equity and Equal Opportunity for the Department of Labor and Training.
Thank you, Cheryl. Bethany, do you want to say a quick hi?
My name is Bethany Light. I am the project coordinator at the commission. I've been there for about 3 years, and I help with the interpreter referral department and all other departments when needed.
Thank you, Bethany. And we have a guest today with us. Would you like to introduce yourself, Sarah?
Thank you. My name is Sarah Bramblet, and I'm the Interim Assistant Director for Workforce Development Services at the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training. And I want to thank you all for letting me join today. My goal for today is really to listen and learn and hear from the community how the department can help address barriers and what maybe unintentional barriers we are creating that we didn't know about. So I'm here to listen and learn, but thank you for letting me join.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate you coming. Okay. So we're going to keep our cameras off to let the interpreter and the speaker, whoever's speaking on, so that it just makes it easier for the people that need our interpreter. So Cheryl and Paul, if you can just shut your cameras off for the present. Thank you. And then if we can put the agenda up, Bethany. So basically our agenda today, we did our introductions. We're going to review our minutes. We're going to discuss our thoughts on the webinar that we had in, I think that was May now, the end of May. Then on to a new topic of accommodating job seekers' needs in relations to job fairs and the hiring process. That's something I was thinking could be something that we work on next, but again, that's just a thought and we can go from there. And obviously after that, we schedule our next meeting. So if you could review the minutes. If everybody just wants to take a second to look over. And once everybody looks it over, if we could have somebody accept and second the minutes.
I move that we pass the minutes.
Thank you. And somebody to second it.
I can
Cheryl
second
Burrell,
that.
I second it.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to have a little bit of discussion, maybe anybody that was at the webinar, what their thoughts were on the webinar. And again, the webinar was on employment journeys of the deaf and hard of hearing. I think one of my biggest takeaways on it was two things. One, how a lot of the deaf and hard of hearing don't want to disclose it because they don't want to be discriminated against, and that they're afraid to ask for accommodations. So I kind of got that was kind of a general feeling that even though people know of the ADA and they know that they have their rights, it seemed to me that there was a fear of asking for their rights and fear of that wouldn't, you know, it would inhibit them from getting the job. So those are some of my takeaways. Does anybody else want to add anything on what their thoughts were for the webinar? Betsy? And you're muted?
I have something similar to say. I think that it was good that we allowed people to talk for 8 to 10 minutes because you got a big sense of the journey that people had been on. And some people that were afraid to disclose much in the beginning of their employment found themselves either at other workplaces where they could disclose more, or they found that they came to the realization that they needed to talk and figure out a little more and have more conversations with their employers.
And yeah.
I just also want to say thank you, Denise, because you did a great job moderating, and I thought you really at certain points asked some good questions of people and drew people out, and it was a lovely presentation. It's great to listen to it.
Yeah, and I definitely, like I said, I think by only having 6, we had originally wanted more than 6. I think we were aiming for 8, and I think 6 actually was just about as many as we could handle, where people had enough time to actually talk about things. Bethany, did you have something you needed to say?
I did not. I accidentally
Okay,
opened my
sorry.
camera, but I do agree that the presentation was amazing and you were a wonderful moderator.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Bethany. Jan, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I agree. And Bethany, you know, was great support, and you were awesome. And all the speakers, I thought it went really, really well. I don't think it could have been any better, except that we could have had more attendees.
Yes.
You know, people are pretty much fried on Zoom. So it's like, oh, another Zoom thing, you know, it's getting to that point. But I think it was fabulous, and it got recorded so people can go and watch it. And I loved hearing everybody's personal experiences. I just thought it was wonderful.
And I think Bethany is like now an expert at how all these things work. So like I said, she's behind the scenes, but let me tell you, she's making everything look smooth for me. So. Did anybody else want to add anything about the webinar they wanted to talk about? Paul?
I wanted to add that I thought it was absolutely fabulous. It went way better than I thought it might go. I think it was very, very valuable, and I'm also glad that it's recorded. It makes me want to do something similar in the near future. I don't know if that's something we can talk about, but I think it was very valuable.
And I think when people start to not be so afraid to talk about it, and also see that there's other people they're opening doors for by talking about it. So I thought that was a great start. Like I said, you know, everybody has their own journey, but there definitely was a lot of commonality with the fear of bringing up the need. So that brought me into why I was a suggested topic on our agenda, and why I love that the DLT is with us today. So accommodating job seekers' needs in the job fair and hiring process. So one of the things I've been looking at over the last few months was anytime I saw a job fair, either whether it was virtual or there was one in meeting, I only once saw, do you need an accommodation? What do you need? Or request something other. So even though people know it's their right, I don't think it's made easy that, well, who do I call if I needed it? So I'm thinking that's something that we can work on with creating some kind of flyer or some kind of campaign about if you are having a job fair and you do need an accommodation, that there's a number that somebody can reach out to for that support. So anybody have any thoughts on that topic? Dan?
I was so happy to see that on the agenda. Because what often happens at job fairs is, they'll if they're in person, they'll do them on, at a hotel, in a like a big, conference area, and it's all these different companies. So it comes down to like, who pays for the interpreter? And if we could think of a way to just, when they don't have that, I mean, if it's just one company that's doing a job fair for their company, it's obvious who should pay for an interpreter. And I think those are the ones where they know, especially the bigger companies, they know they need to provide, they need to put that on the flyer that they'll provide accommodations. And then they'll, try and get interpreters or whatever if people request. But when it's those big job fairs, or even the companies that I just saw posting today, and I'd like to go, it's on the 27th, and it's for Cranston Public Schools, and it's food service workers. And I have a client that wants to go, but they didn't say they'd provide accommodations on that. So, I was going to maybe try and hit up one of the staff interpreters at Perspectives, but they're really busy. They're pretty flat out on that day. Usually Tuesday's a busy day. So if the commission could come up with some way to, if not provide interpreters, because I know they're they're hard to get, but at least to reach out to some of these people that do the job fairs and say, this is what you need to do. Or if this committee could do some education like that. I don't know, but I was really happy to see this on the agenda.
So, and I know I was in contact, I had reached out to somebody that had a job fair because ORS was, again, sending it out. And I just asked the person, I said, oh, do you have interpreters there? And they're like, oh, she goes, we never even thought about that. So it wasn't even a thought that might be something that they would do. So there was a couple of thoughts I had. One was, again, I just did a little research. One was that in a job fair, if employers are coming, there's a cost to being a part of a job fair. So maybe there's a fee, and maybe that fee, that if there's multiple employers there, that fee is put, accessibility is built into the fee to be able to accommodate for interpreters or assistive technology. But maybe if that's built in there's the cost. And as long as, and then there's, again, two ways to get interpreters. I mean, if we can't find one ahead of time, but again, if there is a job fair, they're usually planning this in advance. So if that's something that they do on the, early on when they start promoting it, say, next month is a job fair, if you need any accommodations, and have a date on there. So if the job fair is, July 1st, if anybody needs any accommodations, June 1st, and then at least you have fair. And if you can't get an interpreter, maybe there can be like whoever's hosting the job fair has iPads with an account again, that they can have a virtual interpreter present, or have an iPad that has, speech recognition technology. So if they're having a hard time in a job fair setting, that they can read what people are saying at the job fair. So those are some of my thoughts on if there was something when they start promoting it that they realize there's a cost in it. And again, if it is one company, then that's something that should automatically be something that that should be easy, that they should understand that they need to make that not just the job fair process, but when there's maybe on the application, on the interview, do you need any accommodations? So again, even though people have their rights, they don't feel, I felt from listening to people that that they can't, I know Jan was just saying they can't afford interpreters, but remote interpreters, I think they're a couple dollars a minute. So I'm just saying, I think there's some ways that we could, like I said, if you can't afford a big interpreter, or maybe there can be some kind of a fund that when a small business, maybe there could be a grant or a funding that if small businesses need interpreters. So that's why I said this is just trying to put some thoughts out on how we can do that. But I at least think that we should be encouraging some type of accommodations on an application or on a job fair. And then, like I said, then we can discuss some paying options. But if you had an account for a remote interpreter, that is, I think, a reasonable accommodation if you couldn't afford having an in-person interpreter. But if you're doing it with other job fairs and you build it into the cost of attending the job fair, then it's affordable for all. I thought one of the interesting things, one of our panelists was working for the government, and how it was so it was a non-issue. He had no issues whatsoever. So it was very interesting when you look at the government, that at least the government recognizes that is an important, and they do not give them any issue with budgets and things like that. So, so any other thoughts on that and how we could proceed? Betsy? And you're muted.
I have a question. Do you know who tends to set up the job fairs? Is it, I like the job fairs that I attended mostly were related to universities and colleges and getting students employed. I think they're more common than when I was younger and looking for work all the time. So is it individual companies that set up their job fairs, or do we need to talk to companies? Do we need to talk to colleges? Do we need to talk to somebody else? I just don't know.
And I know, Sarah, you had something to say, and that's why I think the DLT could be a great supporter in this area. Some thoughts, Sarah?
Sure, thank you. Well, so one of the things that I wanted to briefly touch on is the difference that we're seeing now between virtual job fairs and the in-person job fairs. Right now, DLT is hosting job fairs, but through a virtual format. So they are free for employers to utilize our virtual career center, and then we do the back end hosting. And part of how that works is, rather than you think of a traditional job fair where somebody just kind of goes into a gym or a room and can walk around, this has a list of the employers that are going to be attending the job fair, and then job seekers go on our virtual career center and make an appointment to meet with them in a breakout room. When they make that appointment to make their profile, there are questions about accessibility and about
Okay.
And languages of all sorts. But one of the things that I was hoping I could get a little more information from this community about is, those are the traditional accommodations that you would think of, whether it's typing or, or some the other technologies. And I was wondering, is there a benefit to one over the other? Is live interpretation the best? Does that sometimes create a barrier where there's someone else in the room that maybe they don't want to speak about things with someone? What do you all see as the best if we're going to invest in a technological version versus a live version? Which one is, in your opinion, has the least user barriers? And then I can also speak to some of the differences between kind of who hosts job fairs as well, if you would like.
So Sarah, when you're talking, your questions, are you saying like, do you on your questionnaire, when you're asking about different languages, is ASL something that's an option on that?
There are different, it asks what, if there are any additional accommodations. And then there are lists of, additional accommodations needed. So across the board. So right now it's fairly general. This is something this is a new launch, just a few months old.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're looking to do is, to your point, if someone doesn't want to disclose that, what other questions can we be asking that can allow them to disclose that without that fear, or, while still retaining, sensitivity and privacy? Or is it because we can't unfortunately have, have the state resources to have an interpreter if it's not needed, especially if there's 10 or 15 employers, and because it's a private room, to know where to go? The other thought was, is there a technology version that isn't just someone typing, but rather can help as well? So those were some of the questions that I had.
So right now, this is just something, a very easy accommodation that's no charge, but you have to activate it. If you look at the bottom of your screen right now, Sarah, do you see it says live transcript? I don't know if there's words coming up.
I do. I was actually going to ask about that, about what that
entailed. So that's actually something whoever is setting up the Zoom has to enable it in their setup. So it will not appear if you did not enable it in your settings. And it's using automatic speech recognition, and there's no charge for it. It is not 100%, so it's not great for somebody that has super significant hearing loss. But it is a great accommodation if somebody didn't need it or didn't ask ahead, because you couldn't make an accommodation for it. It's something you just have to click on. And like I said, and if I hide mine, I don't need the captions, so it's not coming up on my screen right now. But if you want it, you enable it. And if you don't, you don't. So it's there for the people that need it. And again, it doesn't have to be there for not. And that's an absolutely free thing. And a lot of these platforms like Zoom, like Google Meet, a lot of them have those automatic, so there's no charge for it. And then, like I said, if it's, more, you wouldn't have a cart reporter that you're paying all that for one-on-one. So that's, maybe, so that's something, but this is definitely something we can definitely discuss, but that's a free thing that wouldn't cost. I'm just thinking if there was a job fair and let's say you had an interpreter for 2 hours, and they could go into the different rooms as needed. If there was a deaf individual, they could just say, okay, we have 2 deaf individuals, and take turns for those 2 hours going into rooms, but have one available that can pop into the different rooms. So maybe that's something that could happen. They're available.
Absolutely. And if that's something, that is something that the department, if notified, will create that opportunity. I think from your comments before, it sounds like making it so that people are comfortable with identifying that seems to be one of the larger barriers. We will talk to employers when we go out and talk to them. If an employer wants lay off a version or wants help with finding their staff, if they're going to lay people off, the department will has a team that will go and speak to their staff about job opportunities. And so we do often ask employers if there's any additional accommodation needed, but that's not, we have less interaction with the job seekers telling us that. So that is really something that I would like to try and attack, as to how do we make people feel comfortable with knowing that that's an opportunity for them as well.
And I would think just having that as another language on there, like if you say ASL, so that they know, oh my gosh, look, that's an option. So again, I think that's not commonly, like I said, I did not see it on anything, but if it's just present, then people, at least they know, look, they're recognizing that that's something I may need, or captioning. So, and again, that what we're using on this meeting, we actually have also have a closed captioner on this meeting as well, which again is another free thing, and it is a live person. If you look in the chat, Sarah, there is a, at the top of the chat, it says RCC from Bethany. Do you see that?
Not on mine.
No, let's make recopy it again. Oops, sorry.
I just resent it.
Oh, there it
Okay,
is.
we sent it. Okay, if you click on that, Sarah, it's going to take you to a secondary page, and you can minimize 2 screens. That's actually a free service by Rhode Island Relay, that there is a live person typing. So again, but you just need 48 hours advance notice to have that there. So that's something that can be like, you could have it for a breakout room, like have a one, and if somebody requested ahead of time. So that's with 48 hours notice, you get a live person putting words on the screen. And with no notice, as long as you enable it in your settings, you can have the automatic speech recognition. So those are 2 things that cost nothing, but they just need to be aware of.
Enabled.
So, free things.
The relay is something that we have used with job coaches when people
Yep.
have one-on-ones. And I think what we're trying to do is make sure that these these virtual fairs, that's our primary job fair platform at this point is the virtual one, making sure that we are allowing people the same accessibility as we would if it was a one-on-one meeting with a job coach, because the intent is really to make sure that people can feel like they are going to an interview and actually being hired and not kind of just milling around in a room. So thank you, that's really helpful. And then to Betsy's question about who hosts the fairs, I don't know, I just saw the hand go up, so maybe that was already, but there, for us, there are some where it's, say, a business park, and they will reach out and ask for help as far as, can you promote our fair? Normally, if there is an employer that, like you said, if it's one employer, they're hosting it, that's fairly simple. For the institutes of higher education and the colleges, if they're bringing employers to them, traditionally that institute of higher education is then responsible for offering some sort of accommodation and some sort of accessibility. And so all of the institutes of higher education, the state-run ones at least, have offices of workforce development and continuing education. And those would probably be the most direct route to find out what is happening at a job fair that a college is hosting. And I would say probably for the one that was mentioned with the food services careers, if it's Aramark and that is what Cranston Schools is using, I mean, as noted, they are a very large nationwide company, so they should have services. And if not, I would say that probably most schools have continuing education departments as well. And so workforce development and continuing education tends to be something that high schools are starting to focus on more, and that could be a good access point for those as well.
So I was just thinking, in a virtual fair, it'd be very easy to have a couple interpreters popping back. Sarah, I just back to you for 1 second. If a fair was, if there was some fees involved and it was split up, but you had them and they're just popping in rooms, that could be a possibility as well, right? Like the fair, instead of having that you sign up for 15 minutes and the interpreter. I mean, I don't know if it's been done before, but I would think that you could put them into the different rooms to help out. It's a thought if somebody requested it, right?
If somebody requests it, and again, this is a free service that the state is offering, so there is no fee for anyone involved. But absolutely, if someone requested it, that is something that we would provide. I think part of it is knowing the best route, and is having someone there. I prior to this role, I worked in some healthcare settings. And so translation was always something that we wanted to be respectful of the fact that sometimes it can cause a barrier as
Mhm.
well, feeling like they have to go through 2 or more people to get
Right.
the services that they need, especially if it's not someone in the room. So making sure that in that virtual setting, we're not creating an unintentional barrier. But if that's something that you feel would be less of an issue than trying to rely on, the typed out version, then I think that's something that we could make more of the focus rather than the technological focus.
Well, I think there's like 2 different populations. There's the people that sign language is their primary language, so they can read it, but they couldn't ask a question because there's no interpreter there for them to ask a question. So that would not be, so again, there's 2 different populations there. Then the hard of hearing population, that's a very easy one to accommodate because there's 2 different free things that you can do. But I think what the biggest obstacle is the interpreters, because they can't speak for that. If you're signing and there's no interpreter there, or that's their secondary language, and now they're trying to do an interview in their best person, and they're using, and that's their primary language, and they have to type in. That's not, like I said, what they're comfortable with, and they're at a disadvantage showing their best selves in an interview. And that's, so maybe that's like, again, something we can, think about ways that we can do that. So.
Yeah, and I would be interested to know when you say there's 2 different populations, can you speak a little more about
so-
what you mean by that?
So right now we have an interpreter on this meeting. So we have a couple people. Ernest I think Ernest is using the interpreter, and Jeannie, who's one of our members that came in later, they use the interpreter they are reading what the interpreter is saying. And then if Jeannie and Ernest speak, then the interpreter reverses their role. So they need to be able to fully participate in this, in our meetings. That is a absolute requirement that we have to have an interpreter here. For people that can read and speak for themselves, then the captioning is perfectly sufficient because they can speak for themselves. But for the people that can't, that they need an interpreter to, be able to speak what they're saying. That's why the interpreter is necessary for the big D deaf population that signs. And maybe I could have Ernest speak a little bit on this. Is Ernest around?
Can I just say?
Sure, Betsy. Go ahead, Betsy.
I'm a late deafened person. So what that means is I can take in a lot of sound through my high-powered hearing aids, but not every word is clear. So I miss a lot of consonant sounds and I need the captions. I think the people who are deaf in this group should talk. I mean, I know that reading captions is not their first language. It's reading the signs. They should talk about but I need help with particular phrases and words, and the captioning will do that for me.
And how have you found the 2 different things, Betsy? The RCC, have you found that fairly good for you, or do you need the actual captioner?
The actual captioner is better.
Yes.
And I can use both because I'm kind of comparing them at this meeting, and they're both pretty good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ernest. So maybe you could just give a little background on why it's important to have the interpreters at these job fairs. Tina, you're muted.
I was muted. Sorry. So if you want to go and why you want to need an interpreter for a job fair, many deaf people who use ASL, and that's their first language. So an interpreter is so critically important to be really clear and transparent. In that way, the deaf person can sign in their native language and the deaf person can interpret that. And they're able to ask questions of the hearing person. But like CART is fine. And yes, you're right. It's just kind of captioning. But remember, most deaf people do not have the education level to be able to read some of the larger words. Unfortunately, they have lower reading skills. And so, you know, deaf people would prefer, if you're a big D deaf person, to have an ASL interpreter. So it really meets our language needs. And because CART is in English, and so we want to make sure we understand clearly in our own language. Most deaf people can read, but they're not always sure of the concepts or the context. And it's not always clear to a deaf person. And so they always do prefer to have ASL, so things are explained clearly. And also, you know, at a job fair, it really is important to have a live interpreter for deaf people and hard of hearing people who go to those job fairs, so that they don't have to write back and forth and they're not forced to read captions or auto voice recognition, so that nothing's missed or overlooked. We want to make sure everything's really clear. And some job responsibilities, the deaf person might not clearly understand. They might overlook something. So they, you know, maybe not have the chance to get the job that they want. And so if there's an interpreter there, they can clearly explain, they would understand all the duties, they would know what their responsibilities were, and everything would be really clear to them. And so it's just so important that it's all transparent, and having an interpreter there to do ASL is so important for deaf people. Even me, I mean, I don't need an interpreter because I can read and I can write English, but sometimes something gets past me, or a specific word has a different meaning than what I think it is. And it can be based on the context and the language. And so it's helpful to have an ASL interpreter so that I clearly understand everything. And so ASL interpreters are definitely worth it for job fairs, or, and also it's giving equal access for deaf and hearing people to get jobs. We want to make sure that it's equal, and deaf people need an interpreter for that. I hope that was clear.
Thank you very much, Ernest.
That was very clear, and thank you so much. And I just want to say again, as I learn all of these things, I really appreciate you taking the time to explain them to me, because my intent is to make sure that we do have equal access for everyone.
And that's what I think a lot of people's, their intent, they just don't know. They don't know that that's an obstacle that's out there. And I feel like I said, when I was looking at all these job fair announcements and things, I did not, like I said, I did not see anything on a flyer that ever said, call this number if you need an accommodation. So, and I just think maybe that's something like a DLT, we can do some kind of education to employers when they're asking about that, to make them aware that that they should be, at least have it on. They maybe don't need an interpreter if nobody needs it, but at least put it on there so they know that that's an option. So again, I told you, I just reached out to that one job fair just to see, and they're like, I really never crossed my mind that that's something that we should do. So again, it's not that people don't want to do it, they just don't know that they're excluding people or making it harder for them to participate. Jeannie, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, hi. Sorry that I joined late. Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Ernest was saying about interpreter at job fairs. You know, other than communication access, there's also language barriers, you know, and having a live interpreter there allows us to connect with the person, the potential employer during the interview. We can look at them. And so if we're on Zoom, like, we're not looking at each other, you know, the interpreter allows us as humans to connect. And so I just wanted to add that part.
Thank you, Jeannie. Anybody else have anything? Jan?
Well, Ernest had mentioned, you know, if he didn't have an interpreter, writing, but writing, you're looking down at the page, like Jeannie was saying, making that contact is so important. And there you are writing, and maybe you have a whole paragraph, and like, how patient are they going to feel if you're, you know, standing there writing a note? So it's absolutely necessary, but like the people you were talking about that just didn't have any idea that they were supposed to even have an interpreter. That kind of thing is something that I think either the commission or this committee on the commission can do some education. It would be an awkward situation for me because I'm also doing career developing right now. So you know, I'd be a job developer talking to them about it. So I don't know how that would work. But the other thing is, you know, for ASL is structured so differently than English. So to read it is, even for somebody with really good reading skills, is still not the best. And I'm just, you know, examples of things that happened in the past year. I had a client that we sent his resume in for a job, and it was not at a chain restaurant. It was at a small restaurant. And so they texted him and they wanted to interview him, and he let me know. He said, could you call them? And I said, okay. And he said, you know, make sure they know I need an interpreter. So I did that. And I talked to the guy, and he said, oh yeah, okay. And I'll get back to you. And he never accepted another phone call from me, and he never got back to me. And then the same gentleman applied at Chipotle's, and I thought, they're a big corporation, so no problem. HR there is going to know, there's corporate office is going to know that they have to do this. And we went around and around and around with them, and then they just dropped it, and they wanted to interview him, and he never got an interview. They just never got back to us. She kept saying, oh, I'll call you Friday. And then the next week, oh, I'll call you by Friday. I want to talk to my boss first. I've never done this before. And I sent her all the information on how to get an interpreter, and who to contact, and if she had questions, you know, if they had questions, and nothing happened. So it's really, it's very frustrating, you know, but so for job fairs, definitely, if they're doing a job fair, Aramark, like, you know, is nationwide. And they have nothing. I just looked at the flyer again. They have absolutely nothing about accommodating.
And it was funny, even the virtual, like I said, I never thought to look until I started looking. And then I had, like I said, I saw one, and it was a disability job fair, and that's probably why, but that was the only one. I saw that there was a request for it. So I thought, like I said, so I think that's at least something that we can do. And like I said, I think having the DLT with us, I mean, that's a great place to start. Educating people if they want a job fair, that maybe we do a video on why it's important to have a live interpreter and why it's important for captioning for people. And again, you give, and then they can bring their best self forward, and there's no misinterpretations, and they can, you know, give their best interview if they have accommodations. Anybody else have anything to add on this topic or thoughts? Betsy? And you're muted.
I'm so sorry. I keep. What's our next step here?
So that's what, yeah.
I just don't know how to push this. You know, it seems like it's a problem, and that it happens a lot, that even when people are asking for accommodations, companies are like just turning away from them.
Do you think doing some kind of a campaign, like a educational, I don't know, maybe a flyer or something that can be given out to in employment? I do think, like I said, I'm really excited that the DLT is here, because like I said, that's a great insight into the world. And if we get the DLT, the ones that the job fairs they're doing, then people can see. So I think I kind of think that I'm like, that would be a great place to start. Like, just if if the DLT, if there's a job fair, have on it, if you need a reasonable accommodation, please call and have a person. I mean, I think that's a definite great starting point. What do you think about that, Sarah? Like, maybe we could work on doing something like that, Sarah and Cheryl?
I agree. I think so. prior to this role, I was in Real Jobs Rhode Island, as I mentioned, and we always talked about having those key, we called them screamingly happy reference customers. And what it really means is getting the people that will notice to implement something, and then there's that waterfall effect. And so, like I said, part of the reason why I'm here today is that this is something that in this new role that I have, I want to make sure that we do offer more accessibility to everyone across the board. And on that note, maybe this is, I don't, a later conversation, but I would like to learn more about signing for those who English is not their primary language, and what the differences for that would look like as well. And so I would definitely be interested. Maybe we can have a subsequent meeting around what you feel like would be the best way to gain that information. I think putting it, having ASL listed as one of the languages is a great first step, and that's something that I can have our data and communication team start doing right now. We also, I would like to bring in our communications director, Margot, who is fantastic and has done a lot of outreach, to talk about what a campaign would look like, and what that education could be, something that is, really drives home at the heart of employers how best to offer services, and really with the knowledge that they're missing out on a key demographic that could be really great, well-trained, loyal employees because they're not offering this service.
Wonderful, Sarah. That's great. Bethany, you wanted to say something on that?
I think that possibly a starting point could be the promotion of job fairs, have an ASL interpreting component to it. I think that brings awareness to potential employers, as well as recruitment of the deaf and hard of hearing community to the job fairs, along with, as you guys had mentioned before, I forget who mentioned it, stating, asking whether or not accommodation is needed. But I think, everyone promotes their job fairs. And I think the best starting point might be during that promotion, which is going to be on social media or television ads, would be to have ASL interpretation of those promotions.
Yeah, so I like I said, I think what we're all saying, if we, in the trickle effect, like Sarah's saying, if we start and that you guys are like the benchmark, like, look what we're doing. And then maybe the deaf and hard of hearing community feel like they're actually would be heard, and they would be able to participate fully and present them their best selves. And then once we get through the job fair, it's the interview process. Maybe there's also something the DLT or the Network Rhode Island could have hours that employers, they could share interpreters, or there could be a time that, like, on Friday afternoons, there's a space that businesses could reserve an interpreter, and it's maybe it's state funded. Maybe this could be a DLT or an employment funding thing. I don't know how that all works, but that was something I was thinking about. Cheryl?
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, thank you, Sarah, for joining our meeting. This was something that I had wanted to happen since I initially heard, being a member of the committee, that this was a concern. And so Sarah and I have been sort of communicating offline about the importance of this issue. And I do know that our director is very keen on making sure that we're doing everything we can to be proactive in this regard. And so, I appreciate this conversation. I think there is ultimately going to be an opportunity for the DLT to take the lead and set the tone for how this should be handled. And so the ideas that we're giving to Sarah, this conversation, I assure you, won't be the last conversation, but more importantly, it will move us in the direction that we desire to go, which is to come up with creative ways to really change this whole paradigm. I do want to say, Denise, that I really liked your idea of assessing a fee to the employers that might then give us the opportunity to have the costs available to fund these kinds of services. Obviously, I do not speak for the director or the department in any way, but I just wanted to highlight that I thought that was a proactive and thoughtful idea that we may be able to look more closely at. But it's that kind of a conversation that we need to have in order to move the dial in these areas. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank Sarah. And I know that the DLT is very open to being proactive in this regard. Thank you.
Okay, like I said, I really think that having you guys here, that you can help spread the word. We also have Paul, who's with the Office of Rehabilitation Services. So if there's a job fair, and he's in the deaf and hard of hearing, so if there's a job fair, they can completely promote that there's interpreters, and maybe we just start and have it because it's never been there. You know, and like I said, finding ways to make things happen. But I think if you give advance notice, and it's a minimal fee, if you have 20 interpreters and they pay, 20 employers attending and they all pay $25, now you've covered, having an interpreter there. So maybe over the course of our next meeting, we can just talk about, think about some of the things and some of the ways each of us, some suggestions for our next meeting. So this could be, I feel like, a great next pathway for our next discussion. So again, maybe we set up our next meeting. Ernest, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah. You were talking about maybe we might get some pushback to make it happen, but I would be happy to see it happen. There's a lot of deaf and hard of hearing people who are very frustrated. A lot of going in to try to get jobs. There's a lot of jobs available, but unfortunately here in Rhode Island, people with a disability are underemployed. It's all over the USA. It's like 20%, but there are so many job openings, and there are so many deaf people who really want to work, but where's that help? There's just no communication access. There's no equality. And so I really want to see this change. It's so time for a change. And if we can set up a model for companies that they see it and they're like, oh, we really could hire deaf and hard of hearing individuals if they have the right information, the right process in place, and it's equal access, it'd be a wonderful thing. So, if the Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing could help promote this, and, we can get a flyer out, like Bethany was saying, and we're able to make sure that they put down that they will provide an ASL interpreter if needed, deaf and hard of hearing people will come. If there's a job fair and they see that there's going to be an interpreter there, if not, then they're like, I don't know if I want to go. But it's so important to emphasize that they're going to provide an interpreter if needed, because the deaf people feel more motivated. They'll reach out, they'll go to that job fair, because they know there's an interpreter available. So if you can make it so people are aware that there will be an interpreter and put it in the flyers or or offer captions, that's what's really needed. We need to make sure it's really clear to the deaf and hard of hearing people that they know they will have access. They'll sometimes ask, like, do you think that job fair is going to have an interpreter? And it's awkward to walk in there if you don't know beforehand how to request an interpreter. Sometimes you're embarrassed by it, and you think maybe they won't hire you. And, when the DLT, if they say, you should put this in, that you need an interpreter, you can ask for an ASL interpreter, that would really help. And we could promote that. And, we could be doing that great work here in Rhode Island. So if the DLT needs help or clarification, the Commission is here to help and work together with you for sure.
Thank you for that. And I guarantee that I will be reaching out, and I don't know what the cadence of these meetings are, but I would love to come to the next one and like, I can't promise that I can make sweeping change, but what I can promise is that this conversation and everything that I've learned and will continue to learn will be, front and center when I have discussions with my leadership. And I know that that is something, to echo Cheryl's point, Director Weldon has made it very clear that this is a priority, and that making sure that all communities are served for the services that DLT offers is a priority.
Thank you again, Sarah. Bethany, you had something to add?
I think I have a mix of a question and just a clarification of my previous statement. My question is, how are the job fairs that the DLT is involved in promoted? Are they promoted through social media? Are they promoted through commercials? Is it solely a flyer-based, email-based? Because if it is something that's social media or through commercial, when I was stating that that should have ASL interpretation, I think that that's what draws in the deaf and hard of hearing population. That's what makes it more welcome. That's what makes it so that there may be more of a comfort level of identifying where we heard those issues before. So that's just to clarify that. And then my question is, how do you promote your job fairs?
So there's a few different ways in which we promote them. Currently, because all of the ones that are hosted primarily by DLT are on that virtual platform, we are doing a mixture of email outreach. They are promoted on Back to Work RI, which is the platform that the job fairs are hosted on. They are also promoted through social media, and then on our web page as well. There is a place that people can go to under the Workforce Development Services tab to see which job fairs are available.
Jan?
Oh, correct me if I'm wrong, Bethany, but I thought that Bethany was talking about when you're advertising, is there anything in sign language? Like at Perspectives, everything that we send out, any announcement we set out is also, we have an interpreter make a video so that everybody gets that information, all the staff. So is that what you were asking, Bethany?
I think that's what she was saying.
Thank you, Jan.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah, I
exactly
think that
what I
was
was
just saying,
trying to say. That's exactly what I was trying to say.
And that's, sorry, I heard it as a yes and. So how is it going? How is it being done currently? And this is what we need. So yes, I agree. And those are things, Director Weldon is currently doing YouTube videos about unemployment insurance work search. So that's something that I want to, take to him on making sure that there is accessibility on those as well. And if we can have an interpreter to start, those right now have been fairly, I don't want to say off the cuff, but they're on YouTube, and they're not on, say, a major channel, but having an interpreter there for that as well, I think will be a really great way to start, like we said, this process of making this just what is. It's not something that people have to look for, but it's right there and showing them how important it is.
And Bethany, I know like you and Pam, maybe you could work, because I know you've done really, you guys have mastered how to do them at the same time. Maybe just showing the DLT how you guys go about doing it. Because I think it's just, if you're not familiar with it at all, I think it's probably a little overwhelming to think of how would I do this. But maybe like their first video that the commission could sponsor it, and maybe help create it with them. I mean, I think that would be a great thing for our committee if we're doing something in conjunction with them.
I think you definitely, I would defer to Ernest for that, but
Okay.
Examples that you could see are also on our website of vlogs where Ernest is bringing awareness to upcoming meetings, PSA for community events. Those are good examples. I would ask Ernest on that.
Ernest, could you weigh in on that a little bit?
Denise, I was going to weigh in on that. Actually,
Okay, go ahead, Betsy.
what was done with the vaccination effort was
Okay.
a collaboration between the Department of Health and the Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And there were
Okay.
dedicated hours where ASL assistance was available at vaccination sites. And I think that the same could be true for DLT job fairs, dedicated hours. There'll be interpreters for this hour at the job fair. And if the commission's involved, the commission has a good mailing list, good system of communicating with deaf and hard of hearing people. And I'm sure they would help promote it. So
I think also creating it, like, like I said, I think if you look at, again, the commission has a great resource, but if you had issues on how to do it, like I said, I think that, I know Ernest does a lot of our public service announcements and stuff like that, that he could do one, representing the commission and, have that as part of something, especially when at the beginning, when we're just trying to promote it. So Ernest is like I said, a huge, great energy guy. So.
Thank you. So I think other people had their hands up, but yeah, of course we would support it. We would work with the DLT with whatever you need. We'd be happy to provide support with videoing or Zoom or, anything that we could be helpful with. We would be happy. You have our contact information. Just reach out to us and we'd be happy to help with that. So.
Thank you.
And, I agree, with Bethany, like partnering with the DLT to make the equal access for deaf and hard of hearing people would be great.
Sarah, you had something you want to add?
Oh, I was just gonna say, thank you. I love that idea, the collaboration. I did a lot of work with Department of Health during COVID, and I remember, the conversations around making sure that there were access. And so I would love to see that type of partnership expanded. Much like Cheryl said, I don't speak for Director Weldon directly, but this is something that I'll take directly back to him. I want to get an internal meeting around, what is available, what we can do now, and then absolutely get an offline meeting together with Ernest and you, Denise, and whomever else you think would be best to make sure that we can start rolling this out, because there are jobs available, like you said, and employers are saying that they need workers. So I want to try and make this happen as soon as possible.
Thank you, Sarah. And Jan, you had something to add?
Again, I'm excited about that we're talking about this, and that the collaboration with Cheryl and Sarah and the commission and this committee, that's a great place to start, that the DLT would have interpreters available. Then there's all these big corporations that are also in Rhode Island that could be educated. I mean, I remember the dark ages in Rhode Island when at a hospital, they grabbed a janitor that spoke Spanish to interpret for some older women. It's like, no, and then forget sign language interpreters. They, it was rare. And there was a lot of, the commission was a big part of educating all the hospitals on what they needed to do. And so I'm thinking this is a great start for this. And then hopefully we would branch out and do some education for at least the big corporations when they're doing job fairs or in their hiring process to, I mean, the ADA has been around since, what is it, 1990? They should know, but oftentimes they just, it's something they heard about years ago and now they've forgotten or whatever. So this is a great starting place. I'm very excited about that.
So I think maybe we can schedule our next meeting. And again, I think, we can see what the DLT comes up with. Maybe we can also draft a letter within our committee of an educational letter that we can send out to Department of Human Services. I mean, not Department of Human Services, and what do you call the training, the hiring places of different starting with the big corporations and sending it whoever their hiring departments are. And again, like I said, when I just reached out to that one fair, they're like, it never even occurred to me. So again, a lot of it might be it just hasn't occurred to them, and if they would do the right thing if they knew that. So I will, if people want to send me emails on thoughts, I can try to put a draft together for our next meeting. That's something I can have ready, something that we can, the human resources departments that we could send out. So if anybody wants, blurbs that they want to attach and send it to me, email it to me, and I can draft something for our next meeting, and that's something I can go. And I know the DLT is going to be working on what we've been discussing. And again, I'm always available if the DLT wants me, and I know Ernest is always, accommodating as well. So maybe we can have some meeting before then. So how about we set up our next meeting? So I'm thinking like the beginning of September, if that would work, maybe the first Thursday in September at 3 o'clock. Would that work for everyone? So that would be the 2nd, September 2nd at 3 p.m.
I'll check to make sure there's no conflicts. One moment.
Okay. All right. So I'll send that. That will be our tentative date that we're planning on. And, Sarah, if you can come back as well. And again, we're available before then to have any discussions you like, or give you any more information on some of the things that we talked about today. Ernest?
When the meeting's over, maybe I can make a quick report. We have a meeting for the commission next Wednesday. So if you could send me a brief summary of what the employment committee is doing, so then I can present that at the next meeting for the commission on Wednesday.
Ernest, I'll do the minutes right away. And then you'll have that summary in the minutes that I'll do. I'll do the minutes in the next day or so.
Okay, great. And
Is that okay if I summary? Yeah.
Thank you. So again, I thank everyone for a great conversation. And I think, like I said, I think we can definitely start something. And maybe, like I said, we start something, it can trickle down. And I would like to believe, like I said, that a lot of it is just that people don't know that's something that they could be doing. And again, the fact that for these virtual meetings, captioning is completely free. Whether you have no notice with the automatic speech that we're using, or with 48 hours having free captioning by the Relay conference captioning through Relay. So again, captioning should be a non-issue for meetings being offered. And like I said, and I feel like there's ways we can make interpreters more available, maybe shared interpreter space too, maybe for smaller businesses, maybe they pay a monthly fee to be able to go to a space that there's an interpreter there for 2 hours and they can sign in time. So maybe we can share that expense by having instead of if you want a live interpreter, that there's a shared space somewhere in the state that employers can utilize by, instead of, the potential employee coming to them, that they meet at the space and they assign time. So that was something I was thinking. Jan?
A question for you, Denise, because you're the tech queen. If somebody does make a good faith effort to get an interpreter for a job fair, for example, and there just isn't one available, there is one that they can, if they just have a laptop, what would they need to have?
So, and that's the other thing that, again, there really is no excuse with having an interpreter. It's whether they can be live or not. So the other interpreter, again, I think every deaf person will say they prefer a live interpreter, but there are remote interpreters that you just have to have you can have an iPad or a tablet and an account, with a remote interpreting service. And basically you click on to that app that you have a prepaid account. I believe it's $2 a minute. It charges for having an interpreter there, but you only pay for the time you have the interpreter. So if it's a 10-minute meeting, you're paying $20 for the interpreter versus a 2-hour minimum. So I think there's ways we can educate, and again, I'll come up with some forms, but that's something that there really is no excuse for, because you can always get a remote interpreter. It's preferably, if we have the time, you give the time notice, you can have a live one. But if you cannot get one, there is a backup plan of a remote interpreter, which is basically what we have on this meeting is a remote interpreter. So, so again, absolutely possible to do. And again, I think people just need to be educated that these are options out there, and that, you know, our deaf and hard of hearing people don't have to scramble around to find a number to see if there's an interpreter or any kind of accommodations, that's something that they put right on their flyers, right on their advertisements, that if you need an accommodation, you know, whether it's you know, people think about wheelchairs, now everything has wheelchair accessibility. You know, years ago, buildings didn't, but now that's something people, it's now nobody would think twice about. You know, you wouldn't have a meeting where it wasn't wheelchair accessible. So again, that wasn't always the case. So I think that's something that we can change. So again, you know, everybody put their thinking caps on. Feel free to send me stuff that we can work on before our next meeting on September 2nd. Unless anybody else has anything else to add, hopefully we'll see you next month, September. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks. So same time it would be at 3?
3 o'clock on September 2nd.